Japan is an amazing country to visit, but visiting Japan and living in Japan are two completely different things, or at least that's the viewpoint that seems to get spread around the internet, and it's definitely true. Moving to Japan 6 years ago was probably the biggest decision that I've made in my life so far, a decision that I didn't really think about too deeply at the time. Because of this, my expectations of Japan were set by my first visit to the country, just a few months before I moved here. I never really had any prior long-standing interest in Japan and the culture, but for others that do, or those who have visited Japan a few times, the expectations can be a lot more intense and idealized, which means the contrast between visiting Japan and actually living here can be a lot more striking once you actually decide to make the move. After all, when you're a tourist, you don't exactly have to think about things like opening a bank account, paying taxes, and figuring out which button on your washing machine actually washes your clothes. The honeymoon period wore off a long time ago, and Japan is as normal as it can be to me now, but at the same time, the fact that I'm living here is kind of on the forefront of my mind every day, and with that being said, I'm still able to enjoy all the amazing things about living here in Japan. But there are still many challenges that I face, even after being here for so long, and I think these are challenges that are shared by other foreigners who are also living here in Japan. And one of the more obvious ones is work, but I think there's a bit of a misrepresentation here. Many people have heard how non-existent the work-life balance can be here in Japan, but something that I feel has a bigger impact on foreigners is work opportunities in general. So there's two avenues that you could go down here, which are English-speaking jobs and Japanese-speaking jobs, with the Japanese-speaking jobs also including the ones that are a mixture of English and Japanese. Now for the latter, obviously you're going to have to be able to speak Japanese to a relatively high degree, usually around N2 level or above. But for those who don't speak Japanese to this level, it's kind of going to rule you out of about 95% of the job market. Now this is significant because finding a job is already a tough business, but when you're narrowed down to only 5% of the job market, it becomes even more daunting. And not to mention that these English-speaking jobs usually require some level of experience and might be a little bit competitive. This is why many foreigners that move to Japan tend to start out in English teaching jobs. And then even if you do find a job, your opportunities for career growth might be limited as well for the exact same reasons. If you do speak Japanese to a decent degree, your opportunities are much better, but working in a Japanese environment isn't for everyone. Long hours, overtime, and slow salary growth are quite common. Many newer companies or subsidiaries of foreign companies are much better though, and you'll usually find much better working environments there. I think most of the negative images projected of Japanese work culture are a reflection of the kind of older, more conservative, traditional Japanese companies. And even if you can speak Japanese, I would probably try and avoid working in these companies anyway, unless you're trying to max out your gammon level. Although I honestly think that the work culture is slowly changing here for the better. How you actually navigate work too is quite important. Something like job hopping, where you go about changing jobs every couple of years, is relatively normal in Western countries, but it's not so common here in Japan. Stability is highly valued, so anytime that you do anything like open a bank account, try to take out a loan, or rent an apartment, you'll usually be asked how long you've been working at your current company for. This really can't be understated. The longer you've been with your company and the bigger your company is, the more likely it is that you'll get favored with these, amongst other things like visa renewals. Also, Japanese salaries can be pretty low in comparison to Western salaries, although I don't really see this as much of an issue for the most part because the cost of living is relatively low here unless you're living somewhere like central Tokyo. So I want to preface this next section by saying that by and large, the Japanese medical system is absolutely top-notch. But in all honesty, I do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, and I think that your opinion may vary dramatically on this depending on where you're from. Now, obviously, hospitals and other medical institutes are going to be challenging if you don't speak Japanese to a reasonably high degree. And even if you do speak Japanese, it can still be very challenging because of all the medical terms that get used. And when it comes to health, this can obviously be very stressful if you can't ask all the questions that you want to ask or really understand in full detail what you're being told. On the positive side of things, healthcare here is very good. You get free annual health checks if you're a full-time employee. Healthcare isn't free, but it is very affordable. Insurance premiums normally will scale up with your salary, and you'll be expected to cover a maximum of 30% for any expenses, whether that's hospital visits, prescriptions, or even medical procedures. You can basically walk into any clinic or hospital and you should be able to see a doctor on the same day. All of this is great, and I am largely satisfied with the healthcare here. My main gripes come from the massive hit or miss culture. So back in the UK, you'll have a GP who is like a family doctor, and this person will likely have been your pediatrician for most of your life. In most cases, they'll have access to all of your history, and they can determine what tests you might need and whether you need to see a specialist depending on your symptoms. But in Japan, you're kind of largely responsible for everything yourself. So there's different types of medical institutes here, including clinics, general hospitals, and university hospitals. Clinics are usually very small institutes with just 1 or 2 doctors and a few reception staff. They usually specialize in a particular field and will operate a walk-in service in most cases. So my main issue with these is that they're always extremely busy every single day, and it feels like they operate operate a bit more like a business than a medical institute, where you'll just get a couple of minutes to explain your symptoms to the doctor before they try and provide you with a diagnosis and send you on your way. In most cases, without doing much in the way of testing. With that being said, I have been to clinics that, do have very decent doctors, but at the same time, I've been to quite a few clinics where the doctors just don't really give you a chance to explain your symptoms. I will say that I have been misdiagnosed a couple of times in such places. It's also somewhat concerning that doctors have no requirements to renew their medical license to stay up to date with the latest medical knowledge. Once you get the license, it's valid for life. So if you end up seeing a doctor who pulls out a bucket of leeches to treat your infection, you know you're in trouble. General hospitals also operate walk-in services, but these hospitals have access to better testing facilities and different medical departments. These are much better in my opinion, but they are always very busy as well. And again, it's a bit hit and miss, and it really does depend on the location. The gold standard though is university hospitals. These are hospitals that are connected to medical schools and universities, and generally are at the forefront of medical research. They have much better facilities and medical equipment, and are also capable of dealing with much more complex cases. The main issue with these though is that they almost always require some kind of referral. So you'll normally have to go to a clinic or general hospital first before you can get a referral to go to one of these larger medical hospitals, depending on what your issue is. In general though, I am very satisfied with the medical system here, and most of the issues that foreigners face can be alleviated by learning Japanese. It can just be very daunting to foreigners who come here, don't speak the language, and are used to a different kind of medical system in their own country. When I first moved to Japan, I didn't know a single person here, and as you can imagine, uprooting your entire life and leaving behind every single person that you know is pretty challenging. At the start, making friends was really difficult because I didn't really have any Japanese ability, and I didn't really click with any of the foreigners that I met either. To remedy this though, I basically just became a yes man. I would just hang out with everybody and just say yes to any kind of opportunities for social interaction. This allowed me to have some kind of a semblance of a social life, but at the same time, I didn't really feel like I was connecting with anyone. I would say that it's definitely very easy to suffer from loneliness here. I think it took me about 2 or 3 years of just hanging out with various different groups of people before I really started to form a solid friendship group here, and even so, all of those people were foreigners. I do have Japanese friends as well, but I just don't really hang out with them that much. I think that is a problem that many foreigners encounter. It can be very hard to establish good friendships with Japanese people if you don't speak Japanese. With that being said, if you're an extroverted person, you'll probably be fine, but I've just kind of resigned to the fact that I click better with other foreigners. Those feelings of otherness though, like you're a perpetual outsider, are pretty common though. Konnichiwa. Nani motte no? Oh, nani sore? Tsuge. Wa. I know people that have been here for 10 plus years and speak Japanese fluently, but at the same time still say that they feel like a bit of an outsider. I think the people that struggle with this though are the ones that resist this feeling. When you accept the fact that it's kind of likely that you'll never really be seen as a local, it's much easier to find a sense of peace, and you can focus on having your own unique perspective and finding your own way to navigate the culture. On the flip side of this though, if you don't make an effort to stay in contact with your friends and family back home, it becomes very easy to lose contact with them. And even if you do make the effort to keep in touch with these people, the feelings of guilt that accompany leaving everybody behind are very real. I miss my friends and family on a daily basis. When those major life events happen, like the passing of a family member or perhaps a pet, it becomes very difficult. One aspect about living in Japan that is rarely spoken about, but in some senses probably had the biggest impact on me, is what I like to call the Permanence Paradox. I will say that not everyone falls into this paradox, and some people are more carefree than others. I, unfortunately, am not one of those people, and it has definitely caused me a lot of headaches and regret over the years. What I mean by this paradox is the idea of not wanting to buy or invest in things that would probably improve your quality of life, like a nice sofa, a car, or an air fryer. The reason being is that you have this kind of idea in the back of your mind that you will probably one day move back to your own country, so making all these purchases probably isn't worth it. This inevitably leads to feelings of disappointment because you're not living life in the way you want to live, and you're avoiding all these purchases that would probably improve your quality of life. And it becomes a bit of a feedback loop. When I initially moved to Japan, I only intended to stay here for just 6 months to a year. And then this just turned into 6 years, and I think I spent the first 4 years of this probably without a decent sofa or bed. Not because I couldn't afford them or anything, but just because it felt like it would have been a waste to buy them at the time when I could just stick with cheaper products. I know some people might find this to be a little bit of a stupid mentality, but I still struggle with this to some degree even today. More recently though, I've kind of just bitten the bullet a bit and realized I should probably just let the future take care of itself, and I realized that you can't really put a price on comfort. Ultimately, Japan is what you make of it, and it's just another country like anywhere else in the world with its fair share of issues, and I don't think that moving here is necessarily going to solve all of your problems like some people might believe. And there are many people that do move here and end up struggling with things like loneliness and isolation. But if you're open to various different experiences and you take the time to learn Japanese and you're accepting of your place in society, then you can definitely fit in here no problem. Thanks for watching. Until next time.